Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we're talking about connection to nature. The questioner this week has some trouble connecting to nature, and they shared things such as that they don't really feel a lot when they ground, that they don't feel very connected to plants except for maybe trees, don't really feel in place when all their other pagan friends are talking about their gardens and things like that, whereas they have allergies to a lot of things in nature, and that they prefer winter and autumn over the rest of the year. And just kind of asking us, have we experienced anything like that? Do we have any advice for getting over that? Just talking about that. So first thing, starting with the grounding. Without really knowing your personal situation and without really asking more follow-up questions, it's sort of hard to pinpoint this, but for example, have you been grounding for a long time? Are you fairly new to it? Have you been, and this is questions for everybody watching, not just the questioner, but anyone who's in this position. Have you been doing mostly self-guided grounding? Have you been doing guided groundings where you can actually hear someone else walking you through what you're doing? What kind of grounding visualization are you using is another big one. Sometimes people connect more with some than others. The Tree of Life grounding is actually a very popular one, so if you do feel connection to trees, if you haven't tried that one, that would definitely be somewhere to go. But there are also ways that you can connect with the idea of grounding that don't directly involve nature. The first one that pops into my head is electricity. We ground the way that we ground electricity. So looking into things like that could be really helpful too if you're not so much into the directly outside, outdoorsy, nature-related things. There are other types of visualizations that you could use. Also, for some people, if you've just not been doing it very long, I feel like it is something that takes a lot of practice, and it's not something that you're always going to feel. For many years in my practice, I'll say, there were times that I've talked about in the past that I just didn't do grounding because I thought, oh, it's not a big deal. But I recently made a video about that on my channel about why I've realized that it is important, but I feel like you're not always going to feel it necessarily. But it's important that you keep working with it and keep doing it and familiarize yourself with that, especially if you're doing anything that's going to expend your energy. But the other video on my channel will talk more about that. But it may not feel like a lot. I think more often than not, I don't feel when I'm grounded, I feel when I'm not grounded, and then grounding sort of brings me back to normal. I don't want to say that being grounded is our normal state, because for some people, walking around on clouds is their normal, but for me personally, I tend to feel and notice more when I'm not grounded than I actually feel when I am. The only time I think I would say that I felt when I was grounded, and I hope that Brendan will speak more about this. Brendan was one of my teachers at the witch camp that I attended, and I was doing the elements path with them. One of the things we worked on was grounding, and they had us create objects. There were stones or rocks in this case that we empowered and charged with the feeling and the state of being grounded. They really deeply grounded us with a guided grounding meditation type thing. And then we put that into the stones and then sort of shook that off and got back to normal. And then when we took that object again, physically connected with that object, the intense immediate feeling of, whoop, I'm grounded, was incredible. That is the only time that I can say that I have palpably felt the moment when I was grounded, because it was so quick. Grounding can also be done physically though. If you don't really connect so much with the meditative aspects, you can physically ground by tasting salt or eating root vegetables. I've definitely done that. I had some carrots a while ago that I didn't feel grounded, and I had carrots. I ate a carrot. I felt so much better. And also just things like physically connecting with nature, but I'll talk about that later in this video. The next point was about plants. What do you mean when you say working with plants and that hasn't worked out for you? Working with plants, how? See, I don't know if we're talking about herbalism and working with different plants and their associations, drinking them in tea, burning them as incense, simply growing them for food. I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about here, but all of those things constitute working with plants, in my opinion. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys an herbal tea, I consider that working with those plants. But not everyone does, and not everyone's really into that. Some people have described paganism to me as some people are really nature-based and others are really deity-based. For some people, nature and the elements are not a huge thing in their practice. Their focus is really more on the deity. So that could be a thing that some of you are experiencing as well. Some pagans are really into gardening, and I do feel like that is a very classic stereotypical thing because a lot of us do enjoy it. It's connection to nature, it's caring for the earth, it's, feeding yourself with the wonderful things that you've grown kind of thing. So I get why some people would think that that's something that all of us do, but it's really not all of us. It's just many. Not everyone's into that, and that's okay. Just like the general population of people, not everyone's really into gardening. It's okay not to have the green thumb. The third point about preferring autumn and winter to the other parts of the year, having connection with those seasons is still having connection. Just because you might not connect to the really green part of nature doesn't mean that you don't still connect with nature. If you have something really special about the colors of fall and the autumn leaves or the snow on the ground, anything like that, that's still nature. Just because it's not green doesn't rule it out. It might just mean that you have more connection with harvesting and reaping and those qualities rather than sowing and growing. Years ago, I was doing a vlog every day in April, and one of the days I talked about a lecture that I went to by David Abram, where he talked about nature and how nature is in all things and nature is everywhere, and he said that we are always in relation to nature. And I do think that that is an accurate statement. Even when you're not outside in nature, you're still always in relation to the earth. You're being pulled on by gravity, etc. I will link to that video in the description as well so you can hear what I had to say about that and more of my ramblings about what I had heard him say. But basically, it's okay not to be super nature person. And sometimes that connection will change and develop over time. So if you don't have that now, but you continue working on it and you want to have that, it may develop. Or even if you're not actively working on it, some things may change in your life that later on make you feel more connected. So if you want to connect more to nature, if you want to develop that connection, here's just a few ideas that I came up with for how you might go about that. The first thing, of course, that I can think of is get outside. Physically connect with what you think of as nature. Because even though we're always in connection to nature, even if you're in the basement of a skyscraper or, whatever the case may be, go somewhere that you feel is nature and physically connect to that. Go for a walk. Play on a playground that is outdoors. I think most of them are outdoors. No, they make indoor ones. Play on a playground that is outdoors. Just be outdoors and physically connect. It's, that whole cliche of having your toes in the sand and relaxing, but for real. Take off your shoes and socks and stand on the ground. Bury your feet in the sand. Splash around in a lake or in the ocean. Sit on the ground. Climb a tree. Eat some edible, yummy stuff from one of your friend's gardens. Another thing is just to appreciate nature for its beauty. You don't really have to be doing anything physically with it or directly with it to appreciate the way it looks. So look at it. A big part of what we call having a path that reveres nature is just developing that sense of awe and that feeling of reverence for the earth. So check it out. Find out what about this planet makes you feel that. It might be an elegant winter landscape, or it might be a butterfly on milkweed. It might be the one or two tiny little blossoms of chamomile that occasionally pop up on your potted plant outside your patio door. Or it might be dogs playing in the park. Speaking of which, spend time with animals. And yes, pets count too. All animals, I feel like, are things that we as human beings can associate more easily with nature. That even if you're inside where you don't feel like you're in nature at all, but there's an animal, I think we can make that association. Spend time with animals. Feel the sun on your skin. That's a huge one, and that can be done from indoors sometimes too. I know part of the issue is allergies, things like that. Obviously, that makes it a lot harder to go outside at certain times of year, but again, so you have that connection with the other part of the year when pollen is not a problem. But when you can, and in the ways that you can, this one might sound funny, but I stand by it, say hello to nature. Anyone who's been watching my videos for a long time has heard me mention this before, that in college especially, I used to say good morning to the sun and good night to the moon almost every day, especially if I was outdoors and whenever I saw them. So like on my way walking to my first class of the day, I would be greeting the sun, and I wasn't stopping and doing yoga every morning or anything like that, but as I was walking, just feeling the sun on my skin, and I would literally say, good morning, sun, and good morning, squirrels. There was lots of squirrels, and hello, tree, and things like that. And yeah, it sounds silly. I realize that it sounds silly when I say it in a silly voice like that too. But even as I'm driving, when I used to be driving around with my grandma, I would always be talking to the things on the side of the road. When I drove by them, I'd be like, oh, hello, strawberry stand. Look, you look so nice today. Grandma, look at those wonderful pumpkins. Hello, pumpkins. Just form a relationship with the nature around you. And as someone told me the other day, you only have to worry if they talk back to you. But when you say that to a pagan, it's like, not necessarily, because they don't have mouths and voices necessarily if you're not talking about an animal, but they do have ways of speaking back. Another thing you can do is just start by reflecting on what things in nature you do connect with. And it might be, like I said, just knowing that you have a preference for that winter or autumn landscape over the summer and spring, or it might be knowing that you really like dogs, or you do really like the beach over something else. Just start at those places that you know that there is some kind of feeling of reverence for you, some kind of just that you like it. You might not think of it as this big awe-inspiring thing right now, but what things in nature do you like? Do you really like apples? Do you really like tea, as I mentioned before? What is it? And start from there. Meet yourself where you are. And the last thing I just have to say is, nature is everywhere. It is in everything. It is all of us. We are part of it. And we as a species may be doing a whole lot to harm it, but we can also do a little bit to continue helping it. But it's everywhere. It's all things. Even if you don't necessarily feel it, it is still there. It is always there. And it's okay not to feel it all the time. Doesn't make you not a pagan or anything like that. But if you want to develop that connection, those are a few ideas that might work. Everyone's different, so may or may not work for everyone, but I hope that gives you some brainstorming, at least for anyone who feels like they're in this position. Hop on over to my personal channel and see what I've been up to there, and I will see you next week here on The Pagan Perspective. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.